SimCity 5. This time we're going to do a little bit something different. I'm going to start actually a tutorial series on this. I have seen some good videos with SimCity and some bad videos. And it really just comes from an understanding of how the game works for myself, to let other players be able to actually enjoy the game, because I know it can be quite frustrating. I've seen some regions where people fail very, very quickly at building. So what I'm going to do here is I'm basically just going to open up a tutorial, not a tutorial world, but a sandbox mode world, just so that I have the ability to freely create as I see fit, and then I can explain things as I go. I'm going to try to keep it simple, only do maybe one or two specific things per episode, and then what we'll do is we'll go from there and we'll just build a city that can thrive on its own without having to bond ourselves into the ground. Now, in the world that I have here, I've already got 2 other cities started so that I can be able to, in future episodes, show the linking between the regions so that people understand just between the areas how to connect things. I've seen some videos where people are asking, well, how do I, ship freight? How do I get, resources to other regions? Because these regions they're much like in the real world, how they feed off of each other. Where if one is missing workers, it'll send workers from one area to another. So say like my city over here to the right will send employees to the city over here on the left if they need them, or vice versa. If one needs residences, the other one will go, they'll find housing within the region. It's a little bit more intuitive than the previous sim games where you were used to just self-sufficiently surviving on your own. If you didn't have it, they were, your sims would leave regardless. This one here is a little bit different. I've never really dealt with this issue before, where the actual freeway runs and connects through my city, so I suppose it's probably a good thing, seeing as how I do have a convention center in that other city over there. And the other thing I've been noticing too is that people are still gridding, and when it comes to the gridding, that was kind of abandoned with SimCity 5. SimCity 4 Deluxe and SimCity 3, you had to survive off a grid system because that's the way that your buildings would populate. That's the way they would grow, is on a grid. And that's because you'd zone a whole area with whatever, residential, industrial, commercial. And that's no longer the case. The way the system works now is that the Sims don't travel in a preset grid where they have actually a specific distance that they will go before they just give up, turn around, and go back home. What they will do in this game now is that the engine is set up so that they go to the first available house, they go to the first available commercial place, and they go to the first available job. And then when they go home, they don't go home to the same place. They go home to whatever house is the closest and the most available. So if there's an open spot for them there, they will go there. It's not really an intelligent system. It's just kind of a go where you need to go. It's kind of like the ant farm kind of thing. You don't have a specific home. You just kind of go somewhere. And then it really just depends from there. And I've also seen a lot of misuse of roads. There are certain things you want to use in certain areas, and there are certain things you don't want to use in certain areas that cause poor traffic flow, poor zone expansion, and then understanding what creates medium wealth, high wealth, and low wealth areas. What I'll actually do here is I don't think we'll get into this quite just yet. I'm going to take you to another city here real quick, and I'll explain what I'm talking about. Be just a second here. Okay, everyone, and we're back. This is the city that I had started prior to the last episode. This one is thriving on its own. I'm making actually a very healthy profit, $3,000 an hour, over 100,000 residents. Now, what I mean when I said before about the gridding, I kind of failed when I did this. This is based off just the old style format of creating, zoned grids for items to increase their size off of. And now, the issue you run into when you grid like this is that you run out of room to expand. So now some of these buildings cannot expand. They can't increase their density because the zone is too small. And that's where you're going to run into issues really fast. And the other thing I noticed too is that when people zone, and I make this mistake myself still because it's something I have to get used to doing, is leaving the ends of the zone open. And what I mean by that is that if you can see this zone right here, right where I'm kind of scrolling through, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, it records when it wants to. Obviously somebody's unhappy. what happens is that you get buildings that develop all the way around the edges, and then you can no longer increase zone density. Now, as you can tell, this area is doing very, very well. I mean, I have a lot of, you know, high density buildings, high land values. These are all commercial to the left here and then residential to the right. Most of my city is upgraded to at least level 2 density. There are still a few places that have issues, mainly over here, and that's just because it still runs off the the NIMBY effect and not in my backyard. And there's certain things you can and can't build in certain areas that honestly you wouldn't want to be next to a big steaming factory either. You wouldn't want to expand your house near something like that. And then you have things like this right here that I didn't think about the city layout before I did this, and this is just an example of what block layout does to your city. You run out of room really fast. You can't expand. Granted, it is a successful city. It is making money. However, I've effectively run out of room. I'd have to completely redesign the city in order to be able to expand at this point. I've used pretty much every available space and left a lot of weird gaps that do not that do not enable me to change the layout of the city. I mean, I'm kind of screwed at this point. The city is about as big as it can get. Mainly because the hill, I didn't use that to my advantage. I should have had a curved road along the back edge here to where I could have added more zones into it, but right now it's pretty much as expanded as it'll get. I mean, this is as big as the city can get without totally just demolishing the entire upper half and restructuring and rezoning. But the problem is now I have 2 mines mixed in there as well, and that was the other issue, is I didn't think about those before those were plopped at a later point. Resources is another thing that is a little bit different with SimCity 5 compared to other SimCities. You actually have to think about placement of items like that because they are job producers, but you don't want them next to, say, a residential neighborhood. You don't want them next to a commercial neighborhood because they will bring that area down in density. Because they're treated pretty much like an industrial building. No one wants to live next to it. They're loud, they're obnoxious, just like power plants. No one wants to live next to those either. Especially, polluting options. I pretty much lowered the entire happiness of the entire city when I plopped that thing down. And the other thing you can notice too is that I'm basically maxed out on my demands right now, except for commercial. For some reason, that one, no matter what I do, that one never increases or decreases. It always just stays the same. There is 2 levels to each one of these bars. One is a regional demand and one is a local demand. Now, what I had said previously is that you can rely on other areas in the region. Like there's a city over here, there's a city over here. That one actually belongs to another gaming friend of mine. That's Angry Turkey City over there. It's doing quite well. And then there's there's a city over here, there's a city over here, and there's a new one behind me which I didn't notice. Okay. And with regional demands, what happens there is that if I'm understanding correctly, the dark is mine. The darker color is my demand. Actually, if you hover over it, the green is my demand. So it's a local thing. That's what I need. And then the regional one obviously is masked by it because you can't see it. Is a regional demand, which means in the region they need housing. So you could technically build a city, one city just for residential, one city just for commercial, one city just for industrial. Education is shared between all areas in the region. Vehicles are shared between all areas in the region, which means you don't necessarily need to have a hospital right away, as long as you're playing in a multiplayer world with somebody else that has an ambulance available, a squad available, a fire truck available, and garbage available, because they can send that vehicle to your city. Say if I had 12 fire trucks, I can send 4 specifically for like my neighbor over here. If he needs the help, I can send it to him. That way you don't have to expend your budget in plopping buildings that really aren't necessary because it gets expensive really fast. It's the same thing with resources. If you need a little bit more power, you can buy it from your neighbor if they have an excess. If you need a little bit more water, you can do the same as well. Same thing with sewage and, like I said, garbage, obviously, because those are the two big ones that people will complain about very quickly, and it tends to screw you in the long run. And I know I'm kind of jumping around. This is the first video that I want to get out and kind of explain a few things. It may upset some just because I have a little bit different building style. I tend to be very methodical in things that I lay out. This one here was specifically designed by me so that I can show you an example of just things not to do with a game. Uneven zones, if you can tell, the grid system works and it's really good that you use it. Just don't get yourself locked into doing crap like this right here, where you have buildings that cannot expand any bigger than they are now because the way that the grid is laid out, they can't. They physically cannot increase in size. Oh, somebody's unhappy there. What's that? Oh, you're not happy anymore? Okay. You're happy now. Alright. And the other thing, too, is the tax rates. The tax rates are individual. Let's see your population detail. I've actually lost residents, but I'm increasing them again. Almost 1 million in the region. That's good. There's just a lot of little sudden nuances you can get into. Your bonds as usual, those are a little bit different. There's no negative interest on these, which is nice. That was a feature I believe the first SimCity introduced. But we'll do that in a later episode. That's a budget overview that I'll do, explaining kind of how that works. The ordnance feature was taken out of the game. That was available in SimCity 4, which is kind of a yes and no thing. It'd be nice to have that ability to be able to place ordinances on your city, like the Paperwork Reduction Act was a good one, where you had, youth curfews, organizations that you could put in place by just the faction groups you would want to call it. Like you had your hippies, you had your business people, and it kind of expands on that whole idea. Where certain groups don't want to be next to other groups and they want things in between. Versus just an overall happiness level, because you do, much in real life, you have different groups that, control different parts of the city. Like you have, like a Parks and Rec. They do this with the City Hall modules is what they do. You have, Department of Finance, Department of Tourism, Department of Utilities, and they're really just, they're like the ordinances, but they're really not, because they don't really show you a long-term effect other than making buildings available, and that's it. Which I'm not too terribly impressed with. I'm not getting enough. There's nothing I can do about that. If they're not coming from the region, that's not anything I can do. And the other thing you can do too is you can plop these buildings down here, the bus terminals, and they'll actually pull people to your city from other regions. If they have a bus stop within their city, it will pull them into your city as a, quote-unquote tourist. I think at this point I'm kind of starting to ramble a little bit. But this is just a first episode explaining some of the little nuances of the game. And then we'll get into zoning in a little bit better detail here. And things just to avoid doing. And then road layout as well, because I kind of, also, most people will notice that, I think we left off here talking about road layout, and what I was trying to elaborate on a little bit is that you can't expand yourself into your corners. When it comes to doing that, you leave yourself no room to upgrade any higher at any other form of road, and then it causes traffic issues like this right here, where you're forcing a lot of incoming and outgoing traffic through a single layer street, where you could have an avenue running through your whole city, but that's also a different episode. This is just a basic run through. I probably rambled a little bit. I did cover a lot of material really fast, but go ahead and give the video a like and subscribe if you want to see more. I'll probably put out maybe 2 or 3 more episodes just to see kind of how it gets felt out a little bit, and then we'll go from there. If you do want to see something specific, go ahead and leave it in the comments, and I will go ahead and do a video on it. I'm trying to keep it as untutorial as possible by keeping it more casual. I don't want to make it seem like this is the way you should build, or this is how you need to build. Just more of a general understanding of, okay, this game is a tad bit different than the other SimCities. You have to kind of treat it a little bit different, and it takes a certain level of not only creativity anymore, but also the thought process of, okay, this is how this city has to be laid out. And like I said, this is in no way, shape, or form where I'm telling you specifically this is how your city has to be built. Otherwise, it's going to fail miserably and burn to the ground. You can build your city any way you want, but you can take, maybe 1 or 2 little tips about not, boxing yourself in like I have, not, creating zones where things can't expand. It's just little lessons that, it's easier to find out from somebody else than end up running into yourself and then destroying a city that you worked really hard to build. And like I was saying, just go ahead and leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more. Go ahead and put in the comment sections of this video or any other video that I put out if there's something I missed, if there's something you want me to cover, if there's something that you feel is a little bit different. I will go ahead and maybe change some of the content a little bit to show you what you want to see, or if you want to see a good scenario or a bad scenario, or what happens when certain things go wrong in the city. Like if I were to kill power right now, what would happen? If you want to see little things like that, I could certainly go ahead and show you without any issues. And that's probably going to be about it for this video. Yep, I think I'm happy with it. Alright, well, we'll see you again next time.